I would go off on a small tangent about how crap modern COD is, but every YouTuber under the sun does that, so let me cut right to the point. COD 2, the Big Red One, is a game that most people are not gonna have played simply by virtue of it being a PS2 and original Xbox exclusive. It also does this game no favors that it's going to be overshadowed by COD 2, which is a great game in its own right, but spin-offs rarely perform the same, let alone better than the original. And even so, the Big Red One has a lot of qualities that make it stand out, and in some ways make it a better game than COD 2 in my opinion. Whilst it's not perfect, this game is very respectful to its source material. The journey and maps this game has are very unique, and probably most importantly for what this game was setting out to achieve, the characters in the game have actually stuck with me for years.
Get a load of him. Where do they keep getting these guys? Give it a rest, Brooklyn.
And the characters is exactly where the real meat of this video is gonna start. This is a game that has a very clear inspiration from Band of Brothers, and as a result, its characters should be a priority to get right. And seeing as up until this video, I hadn't played this game in over 15 years, it says a lot that I still remembered who Brooklyn, Vic, Kelly, and Sergeant Hawk are. Now, by no means are they the most complex characters to ever grace the gaming industry, but for what they are, they're well written in my opinion. Sergeant Hawk is exactly what all media wants a sergeant to be. I love a good stereotype.
Somebody grab that goddamn bazooka! We need to get off this beach now!
Vic is a typical bullheaded Texan who will badmouth any crowd or annoying New Yorker.
I'm a freaking one-man army! Never miss a good chance to shut up! But how do
Bloomfield gets called Brooklyn because he keeps insisting he's from the Bronx, and honest to God, he deserves it because all of New York City is the same. I'm from Indiana, don't at me, New Yorkers. And Kelly, he's honestly pretty chill, but he's definitely the least confident of our squad and the one who's always shouting, "Medic!" There are a few more characters that get introduced later on, but we'll get to those later. For most of the game though, these are the characters you'll predominantly be hearing and seeing, and the funny thing is, despite how basic they were, in fact at the start of my replay I didn't care for them at all, they did grow on me by the end. These soldiers actually do things, and it helps so much in making them feel valuable to the player. But sadly, as it turns out, wars kill people, so when members of my squad died throughout the story, I actually started to feel a little sad for them. And I think that's a testament to how your game doesn't need to be complex or the next Metal Gear Solid to have worthwhile characters. Just them having the illusion of being competent and useful soldiers does so much to make the player appreciate them. At least it does with me. But I think what really sews the bond between you and your squad is your journey throughout pretty much every major American campaign in the war against Germany. Yes, I said the entirety of American involvement. This game doesn't start you off with D-Day because honestly it's too good for that. Instead, you get to start off in the African campaign just after Operation Torch, where you encounter the Vichy French of all things. It's not every day you see those guys represented in a video game, and I'll praise this game more for its history later, but suffice to say, I really like their inclusion here. What I also appreciate is this game gives its environments time to marinate. We spent a good 4 missions in Africa, 3 in Sicily, and another 5 in Europe, and unlike most FPS games where 80% of what you're doing is going place to place shooting bad guy number 425, this game is filled with set pieces that do a lot to help it stand out. Hawk gets his first on-screen Purple Heart here in Africa, which leads to us having to get a medic for him, and you honestly should not be armed, buddy. In another level in Africa, there's a plane crash that we actually see the effects of, and we even get to breathe it in. But what stood out to me immediately upon replay, and I already mentioned it a bit earlier, is Sergeant Hawk actually makes the other soldiers have value. There are times you're not gonna have to do anything. Another member of your squad will be delegated that task instead of you, and that's awesome in my opinion. The first time this really stood out to me was in the level called Desert Fox, where rather than have to set mines on the road, you have to protect some engineers doing it because, well, that's their specialty. I don't know shit about that, duh. Also, I love that the anti-tank mines don't explode from infantry, just like in real life. Almost immediately after this too, some soldiers plant charges on a door to bust it wide open so we can progress. In most FPS games, this task would have been delegated to the player no matter what, every single time. But here, you just have to take cover and wait.
Hit the deck!
About to go critical.
I thought it was a sniper.
Personally, I think this helps the game a lot with immersion because one of my biggest pet peeves about FPS titles is how you do everything. There's nothing wrong or boring about waiting for NPCs to just do their work. It makes a game more immersive because obviously in real life, a man is not going to do an entire company's worth of work. And remember how I said the characters grew on me over time? Watching them actually be useful and operate without me is probably a big reason as to why I began to like them. Seeing Brooklyn throw a grenade into a Sicilian bunker that kills some Italian soldier makes me as the player fully witness his competency on the battlefield. It makes me feel like I'm not the sole contributor to this squad or the only reason we're winning the war. It's great for immersion. And if you haven't figured it out by now, yes, the Italians in Sicily appear in this game. I'll talk more about that in the next chapter, but I'm gonna speed through the rest of this segment because everything I just said basically applies to the entire game's mission structure. That, and I don't want to spoil everything on the off chance someone here wants to try the game for the first time, even though most of you here are like me and you've played this game 20 years ago. What I do want to end with is quickly talking about this game's combat. And there's really not much to say. The game is satisfying to play, the guns feel good, they sound good, and what I like most is there's no regenerating health. And because the enemies can sap your health away if you get careless, you're incentivized to play this game with caution. I mean, just look at this clip where I got careless and he immediately paid the price, and mind you, I was playing on normal difficulty. But don't take that as this game being unfairly difficult, because it's not. There are plenty of health packs scattered around, and sometimes the enemies will even drop them. It's just the simple fact that the player seems to have the same health pool as the enemy, which is another great thing. No matter what part of the game you're in, the enemies will never become bullet sponges. Their placement may get more creative and the game may throw in more hazards, but there is never a moment the enemies just tank bullets. And whilst we're on the topic of talking about enemies, it's only right I applaud this game for its choice of enemies, as well as its attempt at respecting history. Now granted, I'm sure a guy like the Frosty One could point out dozens of minuscule issues, but for all intents and purposes, this is a good generic representation of how these factions looked in real life. Now, how can I make such a bold, boisterous claim? Well, despite only appearing once this entire game, the Vichy French actually used the Moss 36 and Moss 38 along with other Froggy-made weapons. With a precedent like that, it's only normal then that the Italians would use the Carcano and Beretta 38. It would have been so easy for the devs to just make everyone use German weapons, but no, they went through the time and effort to make faction-correct guns, and that's awesome. And as for Germany, let's be real, I don't have to tell you what guns they use, so I'll just leave you with this tidbit. The only time the STG appears during this game is in the D-Day mission and after, just like in real life, kind of. And on that topic, let's talk about the D-Day mission here because it is one of a kind. For one, you're not on a Higgins boat like every other FPS ever. No, you're actually on an LCI ship. And because of that, you get to do something no video game ever lets you do, and that is calling in bombardments on the German defenses. And when you land on the beach, the layout of the attack is nothing like Saving Private Ryan and its clones. Instead of scaling a giant hillside, we actually get to push up on the flatter part of the beach and need to help our tanks get across. After this, we actually get pretty far into the German rear defenses, which is another part of the battle most media often neglects to show. Also, those tanks earlier, you probably noticed they were Shermans, right? Why am I bringing that up? Because in Africa, the tanks we had were actually Stuarts, and that's another small accuracy no normal person is gonna notice. Something else I found impressive too is when we're in Gela, Sicily, there is a US sailor attached to our unit. This radioman serves the purpose of calling in bombardments from our ships, and that makes perfect sense because land artillery follows completely different procedures than naval bombardments. So in real life, they would have actually just attached American sailors to army units because it was a lot easier than retraining soldiers in naval procedure. The other thing I want to bring up is the very guns we're using have a lot of small accuracies. The Garand, as a lot of you will know, was the rifle of the army, and it was by far the most used by the infantry during World War II. The Thompson's also iconic, but it was a weapon that was almost exclusively delegated for NCOs, which that's actually what happens to the player because you only get a Thompson when you make the promotion to corporal, and that's great in my opinion. Though this logic doesn't really seem to apply to the Germans because outside of NCOs they should almost universally be using the Kar 98K. But whatever, the last thing I want to tack onto this video is that there's actually period appropriate slang such as calling the Nebelwerfers screaming memes, which that isn't something you hear every day in your World War II media. So is this game just a perfect 10 out of 10 masterpiece with no flaws? No, obviously not. Are you dumb? For starters, this game for all its greatness got the Garen reload wrong. I don't know what it is. It's like COD games have some kind of terminal illness that prevents them from ever making the reload on this gun correct. It just doesn't make any damn sense. And most video games also seem just completely incapable of understanding that American medics on the Western Front were not armed. Watch this video by World War Wisdom for a good breakdown. And also, why in the hell is our infantry squad capable of utilizing tanks? It makes even less sense when they're somehow able to crew a Panzerführer. Like what, did they just suddenly learn German? And on the topic of vehicle segments, much like every other COD game, I really don't like them. Here the vehicle and turret sections are just boring, and I think the game would have been better without them. With the exception of this plane mission I'm playing here in the background, these missions are otherwise just too slow, last too long, and again, some of them don't make any damn sense. Now maybe these sections would have probably been a little tolerable if this game used its soundtrack more. Seriously, for as good as this game's track is, it's virtually never used. But just listen to this vehicle segment here. It's boring. And don't even get me started on this game's opening mission. For one, it and the rest of the game enforces this stupid myth that Tiger tanks were a frequent thing that American GIs would encounter. They were not. In fact, Germany only made 1,300 of them total, so encounters were a total rarity. It's even said that from D-Day to VE Day, Americans only encountered 3 Tiger tanks in total. Oh, and we never returned to this point of the game. Not once. It's never even mentioned again. I don't know what the point of that was. Our first mission could have just been the opening in North Africa and nothing would have changed. Similarly, this game ends pretty abruptly. I get you could only cram so much into a disc back then, but this ending just doesn't feel good. I really can't describe it to you well because this game just suddenly ends after we blow up some V2 rockets. It's really anticlimactic. And let me just quickly mention the characters I didn't talk about earlier because honestly I forgot to up until now in the script. But this game sucks at introducing new guys. Every now and then you'll get some new name characters to the squad, but they either die the mission they're introduced or are added too late in the game for me to care. Which, I guess in a way that kinda makes me like Brooklyn in the game's prologue.
Replacement, just because you got that patch on your shoulder don't mean you're one of us.
But you know what? Pound for pound, I still think this game is really good, and it's worth trying out if you have a working 6th generation console or an emulator. Everyone always talks about how Infinite Warfare is underrated or World at War, and I'm here to say no. World at War is beloved by everyone who's ever played it, and that's myself included, and I know tons of COD players who think Infinite Warfare is great. Yet, I've never met many people who give Big Red One the praise and love that it sorely deserves. The game is really well put together, and outside of the aforementioned vehicle segments, I have never found myself bored in this game. I mean, it says a lot that even as a launch player, I still can say this game is a good experience all these years later.